You don't need this money, Ma. You have little left to live. Just leave us alone at this point. Till this day, I can't believe that these words were said by my lovely son. I felt broke like a glass. I used to give almost whatever he desired, and that's what I got back. Before I begin my story, I just want to show my gratitude by saying thank you for listening to me. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love hearing from you. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me more than you know and shows me do you appreciate what I do or not. Now, let me tell you what really happened. The July heat in Jackson, Mississippi, wrapped my small home like a heavy quilt, the air thick with the scent of magnolias and the faint buzz of cicadas outside my window. I stood in the living room, 70 years old, my hands gripping the old rotary phone's receiver, its cord twisted from years of use. I was Estelle Wilson, a retired baker who'd spent decades kneading dough in the family bakery my mother had built. I dialed my son Kevin's number, my fingers slow but deliberate, wanting to share news of the will I'd finalized, naming him heir to that bakery. A two-story brick building where the smell of vanilla and pecan rolls lingered like a memory. Kevin was 35, ambitious, always sketching plans for new ovens or delivery routes, promising to carry the bakery into a new era. I waited through 3 rings, my heart steady but hopeful until he picked up. Ma, I'm in a meeting with Laura, he said, his voice clipped, distracted. Laura, his wife, was there, her presence a constant now, her talk of big business always hovering. I swallowed my words about the will, said, just checking in, and hung up, the receiver heavy in my hand, his rush stinging more than I wanted to admit. I smoothed my apron, its pockets worn from years of carrying measuring spoons, and turned to preparations for a family dinner in our backyard. The yard was simple, its grass uneven, bordered by a low fence I'd painted white myself. I'd been up since dawn, frying chicken, baking cornbread, and assembling a pumpkin pie, my mother's recipe. Its spices a comfort I needed that day. I set up folding tables, draped them with gingham cloths, and hung paper lanterns from the oak tree, their glow soft against the evening haze. Guests arrived, church friends, neighbors, and a few of Kevin's startup contacts, their chatter blending with a blues playlist from a portable speaker. Laura swept in, her heels impractical for the lawn, her smile practiced. Audrey, Kevin's business partner who'd bankrolled their baking venture, followed, her silk scarf catching the light, her eyes scanning the crowd like she was tallying profits. I arranged platters of chicken and collards, my hands moving on instinct, my smile fixed as I greeted each guest, though my mind lingered on Kevin's curt call. As the dinner progressed, Kevin stood, glass in hand, his voice carrying over the crowd. My mom's got everything under control, always has, he said, grinning wide, his words met with laughter and claps. Audrey nodded at Laura, a quick, knowing glance that felt like a private code. Laura raised her glass, her earrings glinting, and added, to Estelle, the glue of the family. More cheers followed, but the praise felt hollow, their eyes not meeting mine, their applause a performance. I nodded, my lips curved, and carried a tray of pie slices to the dessert table, my steps measured, my chest tight. The air was warm, the lanterns swaying, but a chill settled in me, a sense that the night held something I wasn't meant to see. I cleared plates as the evening wound down, stacking them near the garden hose, my movements automatic. The guests lingered, their voices fading, and I stepped near the kitchen window, left open to ease the heat. That's when I heard it, Audrey's voice, low and sharp, drifting from inside where she stood with Kevin. The will's almost ours, she said, her tone cool, deliberate. She won't check. Kevin's reply was quieter, but clear. Ma doesn't need to dig into it. My hands froze on a plate, water dripping onto my shoes, my breath caught in my throat. The words weren't a mistake. They were a plan, a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. I kept moving, rinsing dishes, my face unchanged, but my mind raced, replaying their voices, their certainty that I'd stay blind. I drove home alone, the Mississippi night dark and humid, my old sedan rattling over familiar roads. My house was modest, its brick weathered but paid off, a testament to years of saving every dime from the bakery. I poured a glass of lemonade I didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling now that I was alone. The bakery wasn't just a building, it was my mother's dream, her hands in the dough, her laughter in the recipes we'd perfected. I'd raised Kevin there, teaching him to roll dough, trusting he'd honor it. I opened the small safe in my bedroom, its hinges creaking, where I kept my most sacred papers, my mother's deed, Kevin's birth certificate, and the will I'd signed to pass the bakery to him. My fingers searched, but the will was gone, its absence a wound that confirmed the worst. I closed the safe, the lemonade sweating on the table, and sat in the dark, knowing I'd been betrayed by the son I'd given everything to. The night after the dinner, sleep evaded me. Audrey's words, the will's almost ours, searing my mind like a brand, each syllable a betrayal that kept me staring at the ceiling of my Jackson, Mississippi home. I was 70, my body tired from years of rolling dough. But my thoughts were sharp, replaying the conversation I'd overheard, the casual certainty in Kevin's voice that I'd never suspect. The missing will from my safe gnawed at me, its absence of theft I felt in my bones. By 3 a.m., I gave up on rest, slipped into my housecoat, and shuffled to the kitchen, where I pulled out a spiral notebook I'd used for recipe notes. I sat at the table, the house silent except for the hum of the fridge, and wrote down everything. Audrey's whisper, Kevin's reply, the date, July 14th, 2019, and the time, just past 8 p.m. The act of writing steadied me, turning my shock into a plan, a vow to uncover their scheme. At dawn, I called the Hinds County Recorder's office, my fingers steady on the rotary phone despite the tremor in my chest. The clerk, her voice clipped with early morning efficiency, asked for the bakery's address, a 2-story brick building on Capitol Street, its wide windows once filled with my mother's pecan rolls. I gave it, my tone calm, and she typed, then hesitated. The property transferred April 10th to Sweet Rise, LLC, she said. My stomach dropped. Whose signature? I asked, already knowing. She read my name, Estelle Wilson, notarized by Derek Tatum, my nephew. I thanked her, hung up, and leaned back in my chair, the notebook open, my breath shallow. Derek, who I saw once a year at reunions, who always chased side hustles, had played a part in this, his notary stamp sealing my loss. I sat there, the morning light creeping through the curtains, and let my mind drift to April. I'd been in the hospital, my lungs heavy with pneumonia, my body weak, my thoughts clouded by fever and oxygen tubes. Kevin had visited, his face soft with concern, carrying a manila folder. Just tax forms, Ma, he'd said, his voice gentle, handing me a pen. Sign these, it's for the bakery's books. I'd trusted him, my son, the boy I'd raised alone, and signed, my hands shaky, my eyes barely focused. The memory hit like a blow. The realization that those weren't tax forms, but the will, slipped in when I was too frail to question. My signature, my trust, had been weaponized against me. I dialed Derek, my grip tight on the receiver. He answered after 5 rings, his voice groggy, guarded. Aunt Estelle, it's early, he said, trying for charm. I cut through it. You notarized a transfer of my bakery, Derek. I was half dead in the hospital, and you let Kevin use you. He stumbled, his excuses flimsy. Kevin said it was your plan, some business move. I got $100 for it, nothing big. My voice hardened. You knew I was fighting for my life, and you didn't call me. You betrayed family. He muttered something about being sorry, but I hung up, my anger a quiet force pushing me to act. By noon, Vera was at my door, her arms full of quilting fabric and a fierce glint in her eyes. We'd sewn blankets for the church for 20 years, our needles moving in sync, our trust unspoken but ironclad. I told her everything. Kevin's boast at the dinner, the conversation by the window, the missing will, Derek's role. She sat across from me, sifting through the safe's remaining papers, old recipes, a deed stub, a photo of my mother at the bakery's opening. They stole your will, she asked, her voice low, her hand still. I nodded, the hospital betrayal raw. They waited until I couldn't fight back. Vera's eyes narrowed. We'll make this right, Estelle. They don't know who they're crossing. She pulled out her tablet, and we searched Mississippi's business registry. Sweet Rise, LLC was filed in March, its sole officer listed as Audrey Wells. The brazenness of it stunned me. Audrey hadn't even hidden her name. The bakery, my mother's legacy, wasn't just a business, it was our history. The place where I'd taught Kevin to braid dough, where we'd laughed over burnt batches. They'd used my love for him, my illness, to steal it, betting I'd stay too trusting to notice. Vera saved the filing, her fingers quick as we built a case. I added to my notebook the clerk's confirmation, Derek's confession, the LLC's date, each fact a brick in the wall I was raising. Kevin texted that afternoon, his tone casual. Dinner Saturday? I stared at the message, my resolve hardening, and replied, "Come on over." The words were a mask, hiding the fight I was preparing. I spent the evening alone, the house quiet except for the creak of the floorboards. I thought of my mother, her hands dusted with flour, her voice promising the bakery would stay ours. Those brick walls weren't just property. They were her sacrifice, my home, the root I'd held through every loss. Kevin and Audrey thought they could take it, counting on my age, my faith in my son, my silence. But they didn't know the woman who'd rebuilt a life after loss, who'd paid off a house on a baker's wages, who'd saved every penny to keep the ovens running. I closed my notebook, my determination a steady flame. This was a war, and I was ready to wage it. The sting of Audrey's words and Kevin's complicity drove 3 days of relentless preparation in my Jackson, Mississippi home, my anger carefully concealed behind warm replies to Kevin's texts. I was 70, my hands still steady from years of shaping dough, and I turned my modest house into a war room, determined to expose their theft of my mother's bakery. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers, bank statements, bakery receipts, my notebook now a chronicle of their deceit. I searched for traces of the forged will, rifling through folders in my desk, but found only vague invoices from Audrey labeled consulting fees, their ambiguity a likely shield for the stolen document. Each dead end fueled my resolve, sharpening my focus to build a case they couldn't escape. Vera arranged a meeting with Marcus, a real estate lawyer from her church, and I met him the first morning at a coffee shop downtown. I recounted the hospital visit in April, Kevin's folder of tax forms, and my pneumonia-weakened signature, my voice even despite the memory's bite. "A signature under duress or illness is fraud," Marcus said, his pen tapping his notepad. "With evidence of intent, Estelle, we can reverse the transfer." His assurance anchored me, turning my hurt into a blueprint for justice. I spent hours gathering proof. The Sweet Rise LLC registration listing Audrey as owner, screenshots of Audrey's social media posts crowing about a sweet empire, and a timeline tying my hospital stay to the bakery's transfer, cross-referenced with county filings and medical records. Each piece was a knot in the net I was weaving, designed to hold them fast. Vera came over the second evening, her eyes fierce as she handed me a USB drive. She'd found a voicemail Kevin had sent Audrey, accidentally forwarded to her in a group chat about the startup. She played it, and Kevin's voice filled my kitchen, calm and conspiratorial. "Once she signs the rest, the bakery's ours. Audrey, you'll lock it down." Audrey's chuckle followed, confident and cold. I gripped the table, their voices confirming every fear. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a calculated theft, my trust their leverage. Vera saved the file, her hands deft. "This is your trump card, Estelle. They can't dodge this." The voicemail was my strongest weapon, a truth they couldn't spin. The evidence transformed my anger into precision, a tool honed for confrontation. I ordered 3 hidden cameras online, their lenses tiny but powerful, equipped with audio and night vision. Vera helped me install them in the dining room, her fingers careful as she tucked one into a ceramic vase, another into the base of a light fixture, and the third behind a wall mirror. We tested the feeds on her tablet, the angles capturing the dining table clearly, no corner out of reach. The cameras were my silent witnesses, ready to record the reckoning I was planning. I texted Kevin, Laura, and Audrey, inviting them for dinner on Saturday, family night, like we used to have. Kevin replied with a quick "sounds good," and a thumbs up emoji. Audrey and Laura agreed with brief confirmations, their responses locking them into my trap. I rearranged the dining room, moving the table so Kevin, Laura, and Audrey would sit facing me, their backs to the wall, no easy exit. I set places for myself, Vera, Kevin, Laura, Audrey, and left one chair empty, its presence a subtle pressure to unsettle them. The evidence, printouts, screenshots, the voicemail transcript went into my mother's old cookbook, its yellowed pages a fitting vault, placed on a dining room shelf. I spent evenings practicing my speech in front of the bathroom mirror, my reflection resolute as I rehearsed. You stole my bakery. You used my sickness. You're finished. I imagined Kevin's forced smile, Audrey's sharp glare, Laura's nervous fidgeting, and felt my strength solidify. This wasn't just about the bakery. It was about reclaiming my mother's legacy, my life's work from their greed. The night before the dinner, I sat in my living room, the house dark except for a single lamp casting shadows on the walls. I held a photo of my mother, her apron dusted with flour, her smile wide as she'd cut the ribbon at the bakery's opening in 1965. That two-story brick building was more than property. It was her resilience, my foundation, the heart Kevin and Audrey thought they could rip out. They'd banked on my age, my love for my son, my silence, but they'd underestimated me. I tucked the photo into my notebook, beside the growing list of their lies, and closed it. Saturday's dinner would be my battlefield, my chance to turn their betrayal into their undoing, and I was armed for the fight. The Saturday of the dinner arrived, and I spent the morning scrubbing my Jackson, Mississippi home until the floors gleamed and the air smelled of lemon polish, not to welcome guests, but to ensure my confrontation landed with precision. I was 70, my hands calloused from decades of baking, and I was setting a trap, not a family gathering. I spread my mother's lace tablecloth over the dining table, its delicate patterns a quiet defiance, and set 6 places, one for me at the head, one each for Kevin, Laura, and Audrey facing me, one for Vera beside me, and an empty chair to keep them uneasy. The hidden cameras in the vase, light fixture, and mirror hummed softly, their feeds live. A small audio recorder, tucked among daisies at the table's center, captured every sound. I cooked a meal that could have been love, fried catfish, cornbread, collard greens, served as if trust still bound us, though I knew my words would shatter that illusion. Kevin arrived first, just before 6, his new button-down shirt crisp, his smile strained, like he sensed the room's edges were too sharp. He hugged me briefly, his hey ma too forced, and glanced at the empty chair, his brow twitching. Audrey swept in next, a bottle of red wine in hand, her laughter loud and grating, her silk scarf a stark contrast to my simple dining room. Laura followed, her expensive dress shimmering, her eyes fixed on her phone, offering only a nod as I took her purse. I greeted them with a warm smile, poured iced tea, and kept the conversation light. Mississippi's humidity, a new bakery downtown. My voice steady despite the fire in my chest. Vera arrived, her presence a quiet anchor, her nod confirming our plan was set. We sat, the table a stage beneath the guise of hospitality. I raised a glass to family, the word bitter on my tongue, and we clinked, their smiles thin, the empty chair looming like an unspoken question. The first half hour was tense, filled with polite praise for the catfish and vague talk about traffic. Audrey shifted the topic to bakery plans, her voice smooth, like she was pitching a boardroom. Kevin nodded, his eyes on her, while Laura scrolled her phone, her fork idle. I sipped my tea, letting the wine loosen their guards, watching their confidence grow with each glass. The daisies in the vase stood bright, their scent masking the tension. Midway through the meal, when the plates were still half full, I set my napkin down and smiled, my pulse calm, my resolve unbreakable. Before we get to the pie, I said, my tone even but firm, there's something to settle. Kevin's laugh was nervous, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Audrey tilted her head, her lips tight. Laura looked up from her phone, startled. I stood, walked to the shelf, and pulled my mother's cookbook from its place, its worn cover familiar in my hands. From its pages, I retrieved 3 manila envelopes, each labeled with their names in my neat handwriting. I handed one to Kevin, one to Audrey, one to Laura, my movements deliberate, my eyes never leaving theirs. Open them, I said, returning to my seat, my hands folded. They hesitated, exchanging quick glances, then tore into the envelopes. Their faces changed as they pulled out the contents: the Sweet Rise LLC registration, screenshots of Audrey's Sweet Empire posts, a transcript of Kevin's voicemail, hospital bills for my pneumonia, and notarization records bearing Derek's name. Kevin's fingers tightened on the papers, his jaw set. Audrey's eyes narrowed, her breath sharp. Laura's phone slipped to the table, her hands shaking. I looked at Kevin, my voice low but steady. You stole my mother's bakery. You used my illness, my trust, to forge my signature. You planned it, and it's all here. Every lie, every step. Audrey spoke first, her voice cutting. This doesn't prove anything, Estelle. Just documents. I held Kevin's gaze, ignoring her. You got Derek to notarize it, Audrey to hide it, and thought I'd be too old, too soft to notice. But I did, and these cameras caught you tonight. I reached into my apron pocket, pulled out a flash drive in a clear case, and set it beside the daisies. This has everything: your words, your faces, your guilt. Stop me, and everyone sees who you are. The room fell silent, the air heavy with their defeat. Kevin clutched his envelope, his eyes wide, his mouth open but wordless. Audrey's hands gripped her papers, her knuckles white, her defiance crumbling. Laura stared at the flash drive, her head bowed, her silence an admission. The food sat cold, the wine untouched. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the floor. This is the last time you sit here as family, I said, my voice final. You're done. I walked out of the dining room, leaving them with their envelopes, their lies exposed, the camera still recording. The quiet that followed was mine, a triumph carved from their betrayal. The silence that lingered after I left the dining room was a weight I carried into the night. My Jackson, Mississippi home feeling both victorious and hollow as I prepared to deliver the final blow. I was 70, my resolve forged in the fire of Kevin's betrayal, and I sat in my bedroom, Vera's tablet glowing in the dark. Using her anonymous account, I uploaded the video we'd edited the previous night, a stark montage that laid their deceit bare. Kevin's mocking control comment at the barbecue. Audrey's voicemail scheming to lock it down, their stunned silence at the dinner table, and my voice, steady and final, "You are no longer my son." I added no captions, no embellishments, just the raw truth. I clicked publish, the upload bar creeping forward, and closed the tablet, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound. The Mississippi night was thick, but I felt a release, as if the truth I'd held so tightly was now free to find its mark. By morning, the video had thousands of views, the number climbing as I sipped coffee and checked Vera's phone, linked to the account. Notifications flooded in, shares, comments, likes, a storm I hadn't anticipated. By evening, it surpassed 70,000, spreading across social media like wildfire through dry grass. Vera called, her voice a mix of awe and urgency. "Estelle, it's on Channel 7. They're calling it a fraud scandal." I turned on the TV, and there it was, a headline flashing. Jackson mother exposes son's bakery theft in viral video. The anchor detailed the deception, the dinner, my evidence, her tone measured but gripping. I muted the broadcast, my coffee cold in my hands, and watched the views hit 100,000. The world had seen, and Kevin's polished startup facade was crumbling. The fallout was swift and merciless. Kevin and Audrey's baking venture, built on crowdfunding and glossy pitches, collapsed under a deluge of scathing reviews, donors branding them thieves and opportunists. Their website crashed, its contact page disabled. Audrey's business license was suspended. A state investigation launched after an anonymous tip, likely a viewer, sent the video with the Sweet Rise filings. Laura vanished from public view, her social media accounts deleted, her phone number disconnected, as if she'd erased herself from the story. I didn't track their downfall, didn't seek out gossip or ask church friends for updates. Their collapse was their own, a consequence of the lies they'd sown. My focus was on the legal fight to reclaim my mother's bakery, guided by Marcus, my lawyer, whose calm expertise kept me steady. A letter from Marcus arrived 4 days later, its pages crisp and official. Kevin's inheritance rights were voided. A fraud complaint was filed with the county, and the forged will was overturned, the bakery's deed restored to my name. The updated will was enclosed, a document I held like a shield. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter spread before me, the new deed beside it, and felt no surge of triumph, only a quiet strength like a river settling after a flood. The bakery wasn't just a building, it was my mother's hands in the dough, my family's heart, and I'd fought to keep it mine. Kevin texted that afternoon, his message brief, "Call me Ma." I messed up. I read it, my finger hovering over the screen, then deleted it without responding. His remorse, if real, was too late, a shadow of his choices. My mailbox began to fill with letters from strangers, their words a blend of admiration and shared pain. Some called me a warrior, others shared their own betrayals. One woman wrote of her son selling her antique shop while she recovered from surgery, her letter heavy with sorrow but resolute with hope. "Your courage lit a fire in me," she said. I read her words, my eyes stinging, and realized my fight had become a light for others bearing similar wounds. Vera visited that evening, her smile wide as she taped the best online comments to my fridge like trophies. Icon one read, "She's unbreakable," said another. We chuckled, the sound softening the ache in my chest, but beneath it, I felt a deeper truth. The victory wasn't in the views or the headlines, it was in the bakery, now mine again, and the silence I'd shattered. I walked to my bedroom, opened my safe, and pulled out a photo of my mother, her apron tied tight, her eyes bright as she kneaded dough in 1965. I traced her face, whispering, "It's ours again." The legal battle was won, the deed secure, but the peace I felt was my own, a quiet power born from standing against those who tried to bury me. A year after the video's truth swept through Jackson, I moved into a small apartment above my mother's bakery, renovated with the last of my savings. I was 71, my hands still strong from years of kneading dough, and the move felt like a reclaiming of what Kevin had tried to steal. Vera helped me settle in, her laughter warm as we hung linen curtains she'd sewn, gospel hymns crackling from a radio on the counter, the scent of fresh paint blending with the Mississippi breeze. The apartment was modest, its walls bare but for a few framed recipes, its windows overlooking the bakery's brick facade on Capitol Street. We unpacked my essentials, my mother's quilt, a stack of hymnals, a chipped teapot, each item anchoring me to this new chapter, a life rebuilt on my terms. I transformed the bakery's back room into a space for women like me, betrayed by those they'd loved most. I called it Roots, a name that spoke of growth from broken soil. I didn't advertise, just spread the word through church friends, and soon 5 women joined me. Lila, whose daughter had sold her jewelry. Nora, left broke by her son's scams. Faye, whose family had forged her checks. Ruth, abandoned after a stroke. And Eve, whose children had claimed her home. Moved in, their bags light, but their spirits resilient. They learned to bake, their hands shaping dough for pecan rolls and cornbread. Their stories shared over flour-dusted tables, each one knitting us closer. Roots wasn't just a class, it was a sanctuary, and I felt its purpose in every batch we baked. One morning, a delivery arrived at the bakery's door, a plain envelope with no return address. Inside were the keys to Kevin's startup office, their metal scratched, and a note in his handwriting, left them at the entrance. Sorry, I didn't check if he'd truly left anything. Didn't care if the keys rusted in a drawer. Instead, I walked to the bakery's display case, found a small wooden plaque, and carved words into it with a knife. She was more than a mother. I hung it above the counter, the keys nailed beside it, a quiet testament to what I'd overcome. Lila noticed it first, her eyes lingering, but she didn't ask and I didn't explain. The plaque spoke for itself, a marker of my strength. Every dawn, I baked, the bakery filling with the scent of cinnamon and yeast, my hands moving through recipes my mother had taught me. I whispered to the ovens, promising the bakery it was safe, a ritual that grounded me, a vow that no one would take it again. Letters kept arriving, slipped under the door, or mailed to Vera's anonymous account. Strangers thanked me for the video, for giving voice to their pain. One woman wrote of her son selling her craft shop during her cancer treatment. Her words raw but resolute. You showed me I can fight. I replied, my pen firm, grow from the ashes. You're stronger than you know. Their stories wove into mine, a network of survival, and I kept their letters in a box beside my mother's photo. Their weight is silent strength. Kevin appeared one afternoon, his knock soft against the bakery's glass door. I saw him through the window, his face gaunt, his jacket worn at the elbows. I paused, my hand on a rolling pin, torn between shutting him out and needing to see if any trace of my son remained. I opened the door, stepping back, and he entered, his eyes scanning the counters like a stranger in a place he'd once called home. Ma, he said, his voice breaking. I offered coffee, not warmth, and we sat at a small table by the window, the hum of the bakery around us. I didn't mean to lose you, he said, tears falling, his hands clasped tight. Audrey pushed, and I thought the bakery would save the business. I was wrong. I listened, my face calm, as he spilled apologies, each one a plea for absolution. When he finished, I looked at him, my voice steady but firm. You didn't lose me, Kevin. You chose to steal, to lie, to break me. You thought I was too old to stand, but you were wrong. His eyes searched mine, hoping for a crack in my resolve, but I offered none. I don't hate you, I said, but you're not my son anymore. You're a stranger, and I owe you nothing. He nodded, his shoulders slumping, and I stood, opening the door. As he left, I didn't reach for him, didn't waver. I closed the door, leaned against it, and felt a peace settle, deep and unshaken. I returned to the counter, the coffee untouched, and looked out at the bakery, where Faye was dusting rolls with sugar, her hum carrying through the air. The bakery was mine, its deed secure, its ovens a witness to my fight. I stepped into the back room, where Nora was teaching Eve to braid dough, their laughter soft. My name, Estelle Wilson, was back on the bakery, back on my life, and I was whole, not because the world had seen my story, but because I'd chosen to tell it.